Hi, David here with Trinity Focus Ministries. I got another video for you guys. I titled this one, Jesus Heals a Blind Man. So, Jesus, I'm sure you guys know, did a lot of miracles. The New Testament's full of miracles that he did. He fed 5,000, even raised the dead, cast demonic spirits out of people. He'll did a lot of healings. But the one that I'm going to talk about is in the book of John, and it's in chapter 9. And I'll be going through, I'm just going to go through the whole chapter. So, all right, let's get started. This is the book of John, chapter 9, starting at verse 1. And it says, "And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" See, back then, they thought that if somebody was born blind or somebody was crippled in any way, that it was their sin that caused it. And not even just their sin, but it could have been family members from before. So it could have been like their father's sin and the reason why their son was born blind. So it was just common that people thought that. But even his disciples thought that. And this is how Jesus answered. He said, Jesus answered, "Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God shall be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me. While it is day, the night cometh, when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with clay. So he basically made mud. He spit on some dirt and made mud and smeared it on the guy's eyes. So, and then starting in verse 7, it says, "And said unto him, Go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by the interpretation sent. He went his way therefore and washed and came seeing." Little side note, this is kind of interesting. That pool of Siloam, it was actually discovered in August of 2005. There was workers working on an old sewage pipe in Jerusalem, and they actually discovered it. And what it was back in the time of Jesus, in ancient times, it was like a fresh water reservoir that the Jews of that time would gather, and they would do it was like a major gathering place by those pools, and they would hang out there and do religious cleansings and stuff like that. But interesting that they found it. But anyway, then it says, the neighbors therefore and they which before had seen him that he was blind said, Is not this he that sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others, He is like him. But he said, I am he. So basically, people started noticing. They're like, hey, wasn't this that blind beggar that was sitting on the corner asking for money all the time and couldn't see? Because they would have known him their whole life, He's always been there. And so, you would notice that. And then going on, starting in verse 10, he says, Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes open? He answered and said, That is called Jesus made clay, and anointed my eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam, and wash. And I went and washed and received sight. Then said they unto him, Where is he? He said, I know not. So the people were asking him basically, what happened? Why? How come? Or how'd you get your sight back? And he said, oh, this guy Jesus put mud on my eyes, and I washed in the pool of Siloam, and now I can see, basically. And they're like, well, where is he? And he he wouldn't have known what Jesus looked like because he was blind, and he was blind until he went to the pool to wash his eyes. So, and then so words getting around, and so the religious leaders of that time, the Jews that were they were known as the Pharisees, they started hearing about this, and by this time, this is just a little background, they had already heard of Jesus, and they had already been plotting on how to capture him and kill him, because they didn't like that he was going around claiming to be the Messiah, because they had already rejected him. So they didn't want anybody to talk about him, or anybody that claimed to be a disciple of Jesus. They were casting them out, basically. But we'll see that a little more. So they brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. And it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. So they brought the blind man to the Pharisees, and it just so happened to be the Sabbath day, which I'm sure you guys know it is the holy day when you're not supposed to do any work back then, or any they had all these rules on the Sabbath, and you weren't supposed to do any type of work whatsoever. So by Jesus even making the clay or healing the blind man, that would have been breaking the rule of the Sabbath. So it was just an excuse for them to have something against Jesus even more. So anyway, then again, starting in verse 15, it says, Then again the Pharisees also asked him how he received his sight. And he said unto them, He put clay upon my eyes, and I washed, and do see. Therefore said some of the Pharisees, This man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, How can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them. They said unto the blind man again, What sayest thou of him that he hath opened thine eyes? He said, He is a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight, until they called the parents of him that had received his sight. So they didn't even believe him. They didn't want to believe him, but so they called the parents forth, And then it says, And they asked them, saying, Is this your son, whom ye say was born blind? How then doth he now see? And his parents, they would have been nervous to speak, They said, His parents answered them and said, We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now seeth we know not, or who hath opened his eyes we know not. He is of age, ask him, he shall speak for himself. Basically, I'm sure they knew that Jesus healed their son's blindness, but they were nervous of the Pharisees. And it goes on to talk about that. The next verse, starting at 22, it says, These words spake his parents because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that he was the Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. Now, for those of you that don't know, a synagogue is a building where Jewish assembly or congregation meets for religious worship or instruction, but it would have basically been the temple, the holy temple. And that might not seem like a big deal, but to them it was a very big deal, because that's where they went to make their sacrifices, and to consult the priest, and to them it was everything. And if they were to be thrown out of the synagogue, they can no longer have a place to worship God, and it would have they would have been outcasts, basically, in the Jewish community. So it was it that's why they didn't want that. They didn't want to be cast out or outcast of the or thrown out of the temple. So, and then um so they're starting again here in verse 23. Therefore said his parents, he is of age, ask him. Then again called they the man that was blind, and said unto him, give God this praise. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered and said, whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereas I was blind, now I see. Then said they to him again, what did he to thee? How opened he thine eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and ye did not hear. Wherefore would you hear it again? Will you also be his disciples? So basically, they're trying to get him to deny that Christ did this. And he kind of throws it back in their face and says, I've already told you. So what? So are you going to believe on him now and become his disciple? And I'm sure that really made him mad. And then in verse 28 it says, then they rivaled him and said, thou art his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. See, they're going back to the time of the Old Testament. They had already decided to reject Jesus as the true Messiah, and they, like I said, they were already planning on killing him. And so starting again at verse 29, it says, we know that God spake unto Moses, as for this fellow, we know not from whence he is. And the man answered and said unto them, why, herein is a marvelous thing, that ye know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened my eyes. Now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshipper of God, and doeth his will, him he heareth. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of the one that was born blind? If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. So he said, he healed my blindness. I mean, nobody, that's a very hard thing to do unless you're God. You can't just heal someone's blindness, especially if they still they can't do it. But back then, just to rub some mud on someone's eyes and then all of a sudden they're healed. He's saying obviously he's God. And then so they were mad at this point. So this is what in 34 they said, they answered and said unto him, thou wast altogether born in sins, and dost thou teach us? And they cast him out. So they were still believing that he was a sin, that the reason he was blind is because he was born in sin, and then they cast him out of the temple. So this guy, even though he was born blind and made to see, now he's cast out of the temple, and he's basically an outcast to his people and the city. So Jesus Jesus talks to him. He goes back to him. So starting in verse 35, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said unto him, dost thou believe on the Son of God? So Jesus went looking for this man because he knew what was happening. And he asked him, "Do you believe on the Son of God? Basically, do you believe in me?" And he answered and said, "Who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him?" Because you can remember, he never saw Jesus. So he didn't know what he looked like or anything. So Jesus said unto him, "Thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee." So he's saying, "I'm Jesus. It's the man you're talking to right now." And and then he said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. So he accepted Jesus and he believed on him, and it gave him hope again. Even though he was cast out of the temple and he was an outcast to his people, he knew that Jesus was God because he healed his blindness, and he now worshiped Jesus, which is the true Messiah. And Jesus said, "For judgment I am come into this world, that they which see me see not see, and that they which see might be made blind." So, and some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words and said unto him, "Are we blind also?" So they knew that he was talking about them. And Jesus said unto them, "If you were blind, you should have no sin. But now ye say, We see, therefore your sin remaineth." That's pretty heavy. But what he's saying is, since they claim to be so righteous that they don't need a savior, and they're good enough to get that's why they rejected the savior, their sin remaineth. And so we know that the only way to truly get into heaven is to have a savior, because we all fall short. So this blind man knew that, this blind man is better off than the religious leaders were, because they rejected Jesus and he chose to follow him. So there's a lot we could go into there, but I've already made this video kind of long. So I really like this story, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. But thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a good day.